Hello and welcome. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching Business Today. Tech titan and Infosys co-founder N R Narayana Murthy recently triggered a massive debate with the remark that my request is that our youngsters must say, "This is my country and I would like to work 70 hours a week." To better appreciate what he said, let's first listen into his remarks.
My request is that our youngsters must say, "This is my country. I want to work 70 hours a week." This is exactly what Germans and Japanese did after the Second World War.
Yes.
The German leader, he sat down with the German leaders, corporate leaders, and he said, "We have to rebuild, and that's your job." And they made sure that every German worked extra hours for a certain number of years. So I hope our leaders too will be able to, when I say leaders, corporate leaders too will be able to address our youngsters and say, for the first time, India has received certain respect. This is the time for us to consolidate and accelerate the progress. And for doing that, we need to work very hard. We need to be disciplined and improve our work productivity.
And joining me now to debate what NRN had to say are three guests from the industry: Manish Sabharwal, Vice Chairman, Team Lease Services; R. Jagannathan, the Editorial Director of Swarajya; and Dr. N.S. Rajan, former CEO of the IDFC Foundation and former Group CHRO of Tata Sons. Welcome to the debate. Manish, I want to start with you and pose the basic question. Is this really about 70 hours ki mazduri, or is it about a work ethic and work culture along with the discipline that is necessary to build careers, at least in the initial years of one's employment?
I mean, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposite thoughts and still function, right? So I think success is not possible without hard work. But I do think working hours has poor connectivity with productivity, right? Productivity is a child of which country you live in, which city you live in, which sector you work in, which firm you work in, and what skills you have. So first of all, I think to be fair, 70 hours, we have to understand whether it includes commute time, whether it includes other things. So I think the point was not 70 hours, the point was hard work. In my sense or my view, the 70 hours is really symbolic of hard work, which nobody disputes. But 70 hours was a specific number that Mr. Murthy used. And I think that is what creates issues for people who are used to commute time not being included in their working hours, which in most other countries, when they talk about working hours, they include commute time, they include all kinds of other things. So I would submit that success is not possible without hard work, but there is no question that productivity has a very poor linkage with working hours. There are many other factors. I live in Karnataka, my parents live in UP. Both states have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/4 the number of people. I mean, India's GDP is $2,500. Bangalore's GDP is $12,500. So if everybody in India lived in Bangalore, India's GDP would be more than China. But so I think which sector you work in, IT is a rounding error in India's labor force. It's only 0.8% of India's labor force, but it's 8% of GDP. Agriculture is 42% of the labor force and only 14%. So I think let's be a little, careful with equating working hours with productivity, but let's also recognize that success is not possible without hard work.
Absolutely, and the debate really about working hard and working smart. But since you brought up other countries, let's see what the ILO, the International Labour Organization, has just said on the subject of the 70-hour work week. It's said that a 70-hour work week is not mandated by any law, and in fact pointed out that developed nations are now transitioning to a 40-hour week because obviously extended work hours don't assure higher productivity, and excessive work reduces productivity due to fatigue. In fact, if you take a look at the chart in this regard, this is very, very significant data, and we have data across a mix of economies. Bangladesh, for example, 49 hours. Kenya, and let's bring that up, 47.9 47. Kenya is 48. India is 47.7. The United States at 40. Canada 36. Germany 35. The same with Norway. The same with Switzerland. Kazakhstan 31. That would be a surprise. And Australia at 29 hours. This is ILO data. And I come to you, Mr. Jagannathan, on this very significant subject which has generated a big debate, and we have had several leading lights of industry also weigh in on this. But Mr. Jagannathan, is this really about working those many hours? Because then questions of compensation, questions of other measurement of output come in. Or should it really be seen as an exhortation for Indians to work really harder? That is what NRN has really said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the 70 hours in themselves are not that relevant. What he wants to say is if you work with commitment and with towards a goal, you will actually not look at the clock. That is what is being said here. And even if you are an employee in a large company, working smart where you deliver results is what counts, not whether you sit at the table or at the canteen or at the water cooler for 70 hours and then take your bus back home. So the issue is not 70 per se. The issue is doing productive work and doing some things with such great commitment that it elevates this country to another level. Now, as far as the ISO statistics that you mentioned, I think ILO and things like that are increasingly becoming irrelevant for a simple reason. They were meant to serve a global economy where there is a very large employee kind of workforce. Today, there are only going to be the labor force is bifurcated into two. That is, one set is actually super skilled and the other skilled is average lower skilled. And both these groups are not going to be employed in organized companies where you work 9 to 5 and go home. So ILO is actually talking about that middle set of companies which are very large and can afford a lot of sloth within, who can then have regular hours. The vast majority of people will be either in the startup economy, which is where the new jobs will get created. Even if you are a new company that lasts for 5 or 7 years, you would have created 50, 100 jobs before you pass out. And then the next new company will take over the slack. So at the bottom end, you have your Uber and Ola drivers who are not employees in the ILO type of definition. They are dependent contractors. That is, people who are part of a large enterprise in terms of recognition, but they are not actually employees. And for them, work depends on the contract level of contract they keep with the app or the company they work for or they're attached to. So their lives depend on the quantum of work they produce in, because it's directly proportional to the hours they put in.
Right.
So it is only in the middle, the organized sector, that the ILO is relevant, but that sector is going to shrink due to automation.
Right. We've seen various people from industry weigh in on this. And for example, Bhavish Aggarwal, the CEO of Ola, said, totally agree with Mr. Murthy's views. It's our moment to go all in and build in one generation what other countries have built over many generations. That's one point of view, Bhavish Aggarwal. Sajjan Jindal, the chairman of JSW, a 5-day culture is not what a rapidly developing nation of our size needs. Our Prime Minister works over 14 to 16 hours every day. My father used to work 12 to 14 hours. I work 10 to 12 hours. CP Gurnani, MD and CEO of Tech Mahindra, it's not limited to the company. It extends to yourself and to your country. He hasn't said work 70 hours for the company, work 40 hours for the company, but work 30 hours for yourself. There's another point of view, and I'm going to try and take that. For example, the chairman of Marico, Harsh Mariwala, he's said, undeniably hard work is the backbone of success, but it is not about the hours clocked in. It's about the quality and passion one brings to those hours. Harsh Goenka of RPG Enterprises, the chairman there, the 5-day office week is dead. People are working nearly 33% of their office time remotely, and it's a game changer. Flexibility is worth as much as to people as an 8% raise. Ashnir Grover, the founder of Bharat Pay, I think Janta got offended here because work is still being measured in hours than outcome. The other thing is people feeling as if youngsters' laziness is only thing keeping India from becoming developed. Radhika Gupta, MD and CEO of Edelweiss AMC, has also weighed in. Mukesh Bansal, founder Carefit of Myntra, says it's a personal choice. Companies demanding 70 hours a week need to also create proportional upside. Mr. Rajan, as a practitioner of HR for many decades, and you run the HR function of a massive group, the Tata Group, the question is outcome, is it really even relevant to measure outcome in terms of the hours that you sit in logged in, or should it be measured by the real outcome?
Yeah, there are 2-3 fundamental aspects. One is, if I go back to the larger interview per se, it was almost an hour. And there are 3-4 different issues. While philosophically, what was shared was in the right direction, there was an issue regarding the number of hours, which is 70. In fact, if you go back to history, around the 19th century, countries used to work almost 3,000 odd hours, and it meant 60 to 70 hours a week. Now, 3 years back, in a different interview, there was a suggestion that we should work for 60 hours, and now we are talking about 70 hours. The whole point is, when you're talking about measuring productivity, and Manish rightly said so, the outcomes are the key. Another broader observation that was made was that our youth actually has a habit of taking not so desirable habits of the West. Of course, it was not expanded, and that is not helping the countries what was shared. There is also an implied element that our culture is not good enough, and we need to be highly determined, highly disciplined, extremely hardworking, almost implying that the current youth or the younger lot are not doing what is necessary to be done. My sense is we are where we are because of the people who brought us here. And to be able to make a generalized observation, either in terms of number of hours, without any direct link to productivity per se, or to the fact that there are elements like a formal economy and informal economy, where if you look at the country, we are talking about employees here which contribute to only about 10%. And when you look at the underemployment that is there across the country, you look at the number of people who are stuck into secondary and tertiary sectors. Now, hours per se loses, I think, in import, because I think people are already working for 10 to 12 hours a day, including compute time.
Right.
But, so we need to be a little careful, because when we talk of developing countries, we are talking about today, even Japan and Germany are actually working at around 30-31 hours, while the OECD average is 33 hours.
Right.
So somewhere over time, the quality of life is critical. And to be able to say that 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours, that is not a salvation.
Okay.
Another issue that is a major concern is the fact that if there is no technological innovation,
Right.
the country is not industrialized, that has a direct bearing on productivity.
Well,
I think there are broader factors to consider.
There are several of those, and in fact, Elon Musk has also weighed in on this, raising the issue of even whether there will be jobs available due to automation and artificial intelligence. But Manish, I want to come back to you. Isn't this a view of hours of work per day, per week, a view from the era of the manned assembly line? And in a knowledge economy, in a services sector where your automation is also increasingly playing a role, this may not be the view to hold.
Well, I mean, there is a difference between cognitive and physical time, right? See, and that comes from the point you're making, that a good farmer is 2 times better than a bad farmer. A good factory electrician is 4 times better than a bad electrician. But a good software programmer or a good salesperson is 50 times better than a bad salesperson. And a good CEO or a good investment manager is 200 times better than a bad CEO or a bad investment manager. So I think in the knowledge economy, cognitive time is different from physical time. And so to hark back to an era where sort of FaceTime in office or leaving your jacket on the chair to indicate that you were somehow still in the office, there is, nostalgia is usually amnesia, first of all. Those places in the old workplaces were not inclusive. They were not exactly. So I would just submit that, we fought hard for political freedom. We're fighting hard for economic freedom. There's an old saying, munne munne bati vinna, mati vinna, this, that as many heads there are that many preferences of life. So everybody's on a different journey. People who want to work 100 hours a week and should be allowed to do that, and people who choose to take the slow track should be allowed to do that. So I'm not sure that the economic development of Japan and Germany was linked to hours worked. It was linked to formalization, urbanization, industrialization, financialization, and human capital. So if we really want to make India less poor, we're fifth in total GDP and we're 138th in per capita GDP. I think we should focus on productivity, which is quite a well-trodden path by other countries. At an individual level, of course, the successful people would have worked hard. But I would be careful with prescribing a 70-hour work week as somehow the solution to raise India's per capita income from 138th to sort of 15th.
Mr. Jagannathan, you covered Indian industry for decades, and you've seen different waves of industrialization to where we are today. Bhavish Aggarwal, Sajjan, Jindal and CP Gurnani, they represent three different sort of points of view as well as the sectors that they address. Why do you think Bhavish says that it's our moment to go all in, or Sajjan Jindal says that we need to work many more hours, or even the other comments in this regard, and we see a different point of view from other members of industry. Is Indian industry also not on the same page on this?
Actually, we must take some lesson from the Pareto ratio of 80-20 rule. That is, in any economy, 80% of the results will be generated by 20% of the people or the resources or whatever it is. If you look at it in this sense, if 20% of our people are effectively and sensibly hardworking in the way they are doing, it explains why Mr. Sajjan Jindal or CP Gurnani have a certain point of view, because they know that their 20%, if it works very hard and does the 70-hour week or the equivalent in terms of effective effort, then they will deliver enough for all the other 80% who may deliver only 20% of the results. So I think it is not necessarily that everybody from the Prime Minister down to the person who is just loading a hand cart somewhere needs to do the same amount of work, and there is productivity in the middle. But that if 20% of this country can be motivated to do very hard work and effective hard work and not just the numerical hard work of 70 hours, then this engine is going to move forward. So we don't need to prescribe it as a general norm for everybody. And as Manish said, that's obviously not the point. The point is to make whoever is effective more effective. For example, even if during COVID, it's not like every single arm of the government worked 70 hours a day. But the key guys, the COVID, the scientist body, the researchers, the people who delivered the vaccines to thousands of people, they worked 70 hours or more a day in trying conditions. Now, could we have met COVID without that 70-hour work week? I don't think so. But you didn't need to do that all over the place. And the rest of the population was actually resting, if you note. Since we were all locked up in houses, we were probably having a ball there, assuming we had a salary, of course. And so you need the 20% that is crucial. A small group in the Reserve Bank sitting made sure that the whole financial system worked when people couldn't go out to ATMs or wherever it is, draw their money or get paid. So 20% rule, the Pareto rule, is important in understanding even this 70-hour work week.
But Mr. Jagannathan, quick follow-up. We haven't discussed China. China reached where it has in economic terms today, with many reports of how they work 3 shifts, and we don't know how long a shift really is in certain parts of the Chinese economy. So should we be therefore comparing with China on our development path, or with developed countries where the total work hours are now reducing? OECD average, which Mr. Rajan pointed out, at around 33 hours.
See, the point is China took to industrialization, opening up, and manufacturing economy at a time when technology was not there to give you the kind of productivity gains that is there. In late 80s and 90s, the internet was hardly there. Most digitized forms of investment were barely coming in, but just being at the experimental stage. So when we are there, we are today in the 2020s, in the third decade of the 21st century, where technology has already replaced a lot of labor. Capital has been plenty before this recent funding winter. So what has happened is we have had to replace labor with capital and technology. So we don't have to work like the Chinese did on manufacturing shop floors. We can actually use technology to actually do even higher productivity, and that's where we need to go. China was living in a different age. We are in a different age where technology is already available to make you productive with far less work hours. So that's where we are.
Okay. Mr. Rajan, should compensation be linked to output or hours that you log in? Now, you've run a payroll for so many years. What should be done?
At the end of it, I think what we are forgetting is that any organization hires people, and you're able to get a certain degree of productivity based on how your org structure, your workflows, your responsibilities, and all of them come together. Now, when you're talking about a compensation, there are different facets that go into defining what a compensation is. The ability to pay the organization is at one level, but also in terms of the kind of outcomes, the kind of output that you expect from an employee is clearly interlinked. The question here really is that no organization is going to hire somebody where it is measured only in terms of number of hours. In fact, interestingly, if I take a leaf from the Tatas itself, because of the fact that there was exploitation of labor way back in the 40s, much before it became a law, Tatas had actually introduced an 8-hour work shift. The question here is, when you look at hours in isolation, I think somewhere there is that element of exploitation that needs to be taken care of. So when you're talking about asking people to work more and pay less, I think the dichotomy is where it starts hurting. The reason why perhaps there is, the entire interview has gone viral is the fact that people are looking at one element in isolation. But in the larger context, I think it's important, on one hand, to take care of the quality of life of an employee, and the other, where the organization is productive and is able to give the right return to shareholders. And I think it's a balance between the two. When you're looking at it in isolation, it tends to be a little skewed.
Absolutely, and the debate over hours or debate over outcome will continue. But as we end this conversation, viewers, I want to play out for you what Elon Musk, and he's a man who has views on most issues, widely followed across the world, had to say about jobs. And maybe that will be the best point to end this conversation, where a future of full employment, long hours of work, and even the number of jobs that are available may be under question. Let's take a quick listen in.
Well, I think we are seeing the most disruptive force in history here. Where we have for the first time, we will have for the first time something that is smarter than the smartest human. And that, it's hard to say exactly what that moment is, but there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything.
Well, AI will be able to do everything, and if that is the future, then the very basic existence of jobs as we know them may be under question. Mr. Sabharwal, Mr. Jagannathan, and Mr. Rajan, thank you very much for your time. With that, it's a wrap. We'll be back with more. Until then, goodbye.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.